We're leaking our fear. We're leaking the pressure that we feel onto other people. We're not always going to get it right, and we are going to leak it. That is a leak of trust, but that leak has long-term implications. It erodes trust. You address the leaks sooner rather than later. 1% shift is a big deal to the people that are impacted. On the other end of that is building a strong relationship, repairing trust. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo. I am so glad you're here because today I want to talk to you about the leaky faucet of leadership. And you better believe it, this whole conversation is going to start with a story about a leaky dishwasher. So, over a year ago, if I'm really honest, we started to see an issue with our dishwasher. About once every, 10 times we ran it, the thing would leak. And sometimes it would be a big leak and we'd have to grab towels and soak it up. And sometimes it would be little. And it was annoying. We were like, oh man, what the heck? But the issue wasn't gigantic and it didn't happen every time or even 50% of the time. So we were like, okay, whatever, this is going to be something for another day, or let's just hope this thing goes away. Quite honestly, let's just hope this thing goes away was probably the lead thought that we had. So over time, actually, right, I could start to see some damage to our floorboards because of the water that would leak. And sometimes we were there when it happened and sometimes we weren't, and then it would sit there, right? So then we started making sure we ran the dishwasher when we were there just in case. Now, a few weeks ago, our neighbors knocked on our door and we were like, hey, what's up? And they said, hey, what's going on up here? We're like, oh, what? Nothing. Oh, they said they had a major waterfall in their ceiling. And we look over at the dishwasher and we see just a little minor water that was coming out because we were in the middle of running it. And we were like, oh crap, that must be from our dishwasher. And we felt horrible because they had a leak in their ceiling. And it didn't ever even occur to me that maybe this was going to be a problem for the folks below our condo. It never even occurred to me that the water that was leaking for us might be a problem for them. And I think this is a great kind of metaphor for what can happen as leaders. We maybe make a mistake. We maybe do something that was not nice or that was harmful, or we maybe pushed somebody when maybe they needed more ease. And, we're leaking our negativity. We're leaking our fear. We're leaking the pressure that we feel onto other people. And we may say, whatever, well, look, this was just an urgent thing and I had to ask my employee to do it. And we have this, tension around us. And we think that it was fine. It was fine because the situation warranted us to be a little bit aggressive or a little bit direct or not holding space to hear what our employee had to say. And what happens is that is a leak. That is a leak of trust because now, right, you're putting your employees or your colleagues or whomever on alert. What if she leaks that tomorrow and makes me feel bad? What if she leaks that next week and puts all this pressure on me? So my point being that it's important for you to address when the leaks happen because they will, right? Dishwashers, they end up breaking. They don't live a lifetime. And our energy, the way that we lead, we're not always going to get it right. We're not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to be in that positive mood. We're going to feel pressure. We're going to be annoyed. We're going to have days where we're frustrated and we are going to leak it. As much work as you might do on yourself, as much as you keep your emotions in check and you practice the muscle of not letting your inner critic get involved in things. It's going to happen. And the important message that I want to leave with you today is that it's important that you address the leaks sooner rather than later. Because let's be honest, what happened with this whole dishwasher story is that it was going to be a pain. It was going to be time consuming and a whole process to figure out what was wrong with this dishwasher, because I certainly am not an expert. My husband certainly is not an expert on anything plumbing. And so it was going to require us getting some support. It was going to require us setting up an appointment, paying out of pocket to figure out, like, how do we fix this dishwasher so it doesn't leak once every 10 times? And we didn't do it. We just let it ride. But then what happened was we let it ride, but then there was an immediate need. Then it was, now we can't use the dishwasher at all because we don't want to cause flooding for the downstairs neighbors. Now we can't, just immediately have a new dishwasher because that's going to be a process. So, at the end of the day, right, our lack of attention to it created a quote unquote emergency now. And we could have handled it much different, just like in leadership, right? Yeah, it's easy in the moment to let that go and think you can sweep it under the rug and just forget about it. But that leak has long-term implications. It erodes trust. It makes people question, well, who are you really? Are you going to support me when the chips are down? How are you talking about me behind my back? All of those things come into play when we show up in not the best version of ourselves. And sometimes, when you have that leak and you might know it, you might have a sense, oh yes, every time, let's just say that quarterly board meeting happens, I get really stressed out and nervous and I kind of take it out on my team. Well, you might need some support to figure out how to be different in those times that create that situation for you, that create those difficult emotions, that you put the pressure on yourself, that you act in a way that is outside of your normal, authentic leadership style. You may need to call a quote unquote plumber. You might need to work with a coach and say, yeah, there's this thing that happens. And I don't want it to catch up with me in 3 years because all of a sudden, it's just not working this way. And that small leak becomes something much bigger, because that's really what happens in our leadership roles when we don't address the little things. And I don't mean the things that don't matter. I mean, when we don't address how we're showing up in ways that we're not proud of, when we don't try to do the repair in those relationships, what happens is it can build and explode in ways you may not be able to predict or understand. And when those things, they may blow up, it may even blow up and say, maybe it's not a fit anymore for you in that role because these things have been adding up. Or maybe you get passed on projects and you don't even realize it because leadership sees how you're operating under pressure and they need somebody that has a bit more grounded confidence. I'm just giving some examples here, but you may need some support to identify how to stop that leaky bucket of emotion and how you're showing up. Just like my husband and I absolutely needed a plumber to help us understand what was going on. And oh, by the way, we completely freaking overpaid for that plumber. and I blame myself because we just needed a plumber quickly and efficiently. And, you want to pay for a plumber like that, you're going to pay top dollar. And we felt that we needed to do it right away because we didn't want the neighbors to encounter a deeper issue. So I hope that this is helping you to think about what might you have been leaking in your leadership. You can ask yourself a few key questions to help you do this kind of excavation and deep reflection work. One of those questions is, where are you leaking energy? Because where are you drained? Where are you maybe draining on other people? Those are kind of a 2-for-1 question. The second question is, What are you ignoring, or where are you ignoring relationships that have a crack in it? And maybe that's with your boss. Like maybe you're feeling a little tension and you're hoping it just goes away, but it kind of hasn't. Maybe it's been a few weeks. Maybe it's been a couple months. Maybe it's been a couple years. But where are the cracks in relationships that you care about? And then thirdly, who have you treated unfairly or perhaps without as much respect as they deserve? And maybe it's time to make amends. Who have you treated unfairly or perhaps with a little bit of contempt or resentment? And it's time to make that repair. Look, this is, I know this is going live in the middle of summer, and gosh, you're probably wanting, some light reading, but I hope you're sprinkling it with these opportunities to do some deep reflection, because when we're actually out of our environments, or when we are taking the pressure off of ourselves a little bit because it's vacation season, it can be a good time to really ask ourselves, who have we been in the past 3 months or 6 months? And where do we want to make some course correction to show up as our own best friend and in a better way to others? That's what leadership development requires. It requires us to look deeply at our patterns and see where, we need to make that little adjustment. And I'll use an analogy that I think is used quite often, but this idea that if you're flying a plane and you're like 1% off course, you're going to land in a completely different destination than you planned. And that's no different than how we show up as leaders. If every day you're 1% off of being the kind of generous, compassionate, empathetic leader that you want to be, then you're going to need to course correct, because otherwise you might go down a leaky pathway and end up changing who you are and how you show up, because you think, oh, well, it was just this one time. It's not a big deal. But let me tell you, that 1% shift is a big deal to the people that are impacted by it. That 1% shift feels huge when somebody has to take in the proverbial shit that's rolling downhill. When you show up and you don't say thank you for the hard work, when you show up and you don't say hi in the morning, whether that's in person or on your chat, when you leak your stress onto others and demand more of them versus co-create what's possible for fixing whatever needs to be fixed, that leak can really make a huge impact on people, more than you know, because people don't come and say to you, that thing that you said to me yesterday really hurt me. We don't do that in the workplace, and we should. But because that's not a behavior that's been rewarded or accepted, as a leader, you have to do that assessment of, hey, did my leak yesterday have an impact on somebody? Or was that leak just on myself? And do I want to fix that for myself? Can I be my own best friend? Because when I can actually correct it for myself and how I treated myself, I can actually show up better for others. So I hope that this landed a few new thoughts and ahas for you in terms of not just how you show up as a leader, but then how you do the work to course correct so that you can stay true to your personal brand, your authentic leadership style, and stay committed to the kind of person that you want to be day in and day out. And side note, the dishwasher is coming next week. And actually, I'm thrilled to have a new dishwasher. Here's the kicker, right? So we go shopping for a dishwasher and we realize, oh my gosh, yeah, we have a really loud dishwasher, which we knew because every time we watch TV, we have to turn up the volume when the dishwasher is on. And what we were able to do is buy a dishwasher with a much quieter decibel level. And so our lives are going to improve because we're making this swap out. And we could have had our lives improved probably a year ago if we just acknowledged that dishwasher that lifespan had ended. The chapter of the Frigidaire is over. You know what I'm saying? We're moving on to Bosch. We're excited. And I think that's what you can look forward to. That when you do have those hard conversations of repair of what has been leaking, what you don't realize that's possible on the other end of that is building a strong relationship, repairing trust, and building stronger engagement with your team because they have more respect for you and you were able to help them heal something that you caused. So I just love this episode actually. I knew I was going to love it, but now I love it even more because I think these messages are game changing for taking your leadership to the next level. If you want to talk to me more about this for your own leadership or bringing this type of concept to your team in a professional development series, this is the work that I do. So visit me at coachtosca.com or look for those links in the show notes. I'd be happy to support you and brainstorm how I can help your team rise to the next level of performance. And also, if you've gained something from this episode, I'd love for you to rate, review, or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, because the more leaders that receive this kind of message, well, the healthier our workplaces are going to be at the end of the day. All right. Thank you so much for joining on this episode of the Unlock Lab, and ciao for now.